aunt set down her fork like she was making an announcement. That's what I remember most. Not what she said first. Not the way my cousin shifted in her seat. Not even the smell of the turkey still sitting in the middle of the table getting cold. I remember the sound of that fork hitting the ceramic plate. Deliberate. Like punctuation before a sentence she'd already rehearsed. "I just think," she said, and she looked right at me, "that at your age, Brooke was already on her second promotion and had a down payment saved. That's all I'm saying." She picked up her wine glass, smiled at no one in particular. "That's all I'm saying." It was Thanksgiving. I had driven 4 hours to be there. I need to back up, because if I just tell you the ending, you won't understand why it took me as long as it did to get there. And I think you need to understand that part. The part where I kept showing up anyway. The part where I kept thinking I was the problem. My name is Nora. I'm 31. I do UX design, mostly contract work, and for the past 3 years I've been building something that finally feels like mine. But that's not where this story starts. It starts with my cousin Brooke. Brooke is 2 years older than me. She has a husband named Pete, a 4-bedroom house in a suburb outside of Columbus, a golden retriever, and a kitchen island that my aunt mentions every single time someone gives her an opening. Brooke is lovely. I want to be clear about that. This is not a story about hating my cousin. Brooke has been mostly kind to me for our entire lives, and whatever role she plays in what I'm about to tell you, she didn't ask for it. My aunt cast her as the standard. That wasn't Brooke's choice. Growing up, my mom's older sister had a very specific idea of what a successful woman looked like. It looked like a nice house in a good school district. It looked like a husband with benefits and a 401k. It looked like dinner on the table at a reasonable hour and a savings account and a sensible car. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. I mean that genuinely. But in my aunt's world, those things weren't just one version of a good life. They were the only version. And Brooke had them. So Brooke became the reference point for everyone else. I became the question mark. I left Ohio at 22 for a design program in Portland that my aunt called a very expensive way to make PowerPoints. I freelanced through my mid-20s, which she called not really working. I rented an apartment instead of buying, which she called throwing money away. I dated someone for 2 years who she called perfectly nice, but is he going anywhere? I was always one decision behind, one milestone short, one life event away from finally making sense to her. She never said it cruelly. That's the thing that kept me off balance for so long. She had this way of wrapping the comparison in warmth, like she was concerned, like she was rooting for me, like she just wanted to see me catch up. "I worry about you, sweetie," was her favorite opener. It made it impossible to push back without feeling like I was being ungrateful, like I was misunderstanding her love. So I didn't push back, not for a long time. I showed up. I helped with dishes. I asked about her garden. I sat at the table every Thanksgiving and every Christmas and every Easter brunch, and I absorbed it, year after year, because she was family, and I loved my mom, and my mom needed me to keep the peace. Before I tell you what happened at that Thanksgiving dinner, I want to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? Are you listening to this on a commute? Or late at night when the house is quiet? I always wonder about that. I find it matters, somehow, knowing that someone out there is hearing this. Okay, back to the table. It was the 3rd year in a row that I'd driven those 4 hours alone. My mom was there, my uncle, Brooke and Pete, their daughter, who was 4 and had been walking around with a paper turkey taped to her shirt since noon. There were probably 12 of us around that table. The conversation had been fine, actually. Better than fine for a while. We talked about my uncle's knee surgery. We talked about the weather that was coming in. Brooke's daughter said something funny about the cranberry sauce, and everyone laughed, and for about 40 minutes, it felt like a normal family dinner. Then my aunt asked me about work. Not in a mean way, just the question. "So what are you working on these days, Nora?" I told her. I'd just wrapped a 6-month contract with a healthcare tech company, the biggest project I'd taken on to date. I was proud of it. I said that. I told her it had gone well. She nodded. "That's good. Is that the kind of thing that's steady? Like, do they keep you on?" "It's contract work," I said. "So this one ended, but I've got another one starting in January." She cut her turkey. "So there's always a gap in between." "Sometimes? Yeah. That's pretty normal for the field." Brooke just got made director, she said. It wasn't a non sequitur to her. In her mind, those two things were directly connected. My contract gap and Brooke's promotion were data points in the same spreadsheet. Full benefits, the whole package. Pete's company does profit sharing now too. They're talking about maybe a bigger place in the spring. That's great, I said. And I meant it. I just think, she said, and she set down her fork, that at your age, Brooke was already on her second promotion and had a down payment saved. That's all I'm saying. The table went a little quiet. Not completely. My uncle kept eating. Brooke looked at her plate. That's all I'm saying, she said again, and smiled and picked up her wine. My mom touched my arm under the table, a gentle press, the kind that means please don't, the kind I'd been feeling since I was 17 years old. I took a breath. I picked up my own fork, and I said, "You're right. Brooke is doing amazing." Because I wasn't ready yet. But I was close. Here is what my aunt didn't know, and what I hadn't told anyone in my family except my mom, and what I had been sitting with alone for 7 months by the time that Thanksgiving happened. In April of that year, I had bought a house, not a condo, not a starter home in a neighborhood with a homeowners association that sends you letters about your lawn. A house, a 1940s Craftsman with original hardwood floors and a porch that wraps around the front, and a backyard big enough that I put a vegetable garden in it last summer and grew more tomatoes than I could eat. It's in a small coastal town in Oregon, about 20 minutes from where I'd been renting for the past 4 years. And the first morning I woke up in it, I sat on that porch with a cup of coffee and cried a little, in the good way. I paid for it with money I'd been saving for 6 years. Quietly, steadily. Without announcing it or asking for anyone's opinion or letting anyone have access to a single number in my bank account. Because I had learned early that when I shared financial things with my family, they became communal property for discussion and comparison and gentle discouragement. I had also, in June, gotten engaged. His name is Daniel. He's a structural engineer. He is steady and kind and laughs at the same things I laugh at, and once drove 40 minutes in the rain because I texted him that I was having a bad day and could use company. We met at a friend's birthday dinner 3 years ago, and I knew within about 4 months that this was the person I wanted to build something with. We got engaged quietly. No big announcement, no Instagram post, no dinner party where we made everyone cry. Just the two of us, at home, with takeout pad thai and the sound of the ocean through the windows. I told my mom because I wanted her to know, and because she is my mom and I love her, and she cried in exactly the way I needed her to. I asked her to keep it between us for a while. She did. She has always been better at this than she gets credit for. I didn't tell my aunt because I didn't want Thanksgiving to be about my engagement before I was ready for it to be. I didn't want the timeline questions. I didn't want the venue suggestions. I didn't want the gentle implications about how long we'd been together, and whether we'd talked about children, and whether Daniel was the kind of man who could provide stability. I just wanted to eat turkey in peace and drive home and sleep in my own house with my dog at my feet and my fiancé's arm around me. But my aunt set down her fork, and something shifted. I didn't say anything at the table. I want to be honest about that. I didn't have some perfect comeback in the moment. I just nodded and ate and helped clear the dishes afterward, and hugged everyone on the way out, and drove home on the highway while the radio played something I don't remember. I called Daniel from the car, not because I was upset exactly, more because I needed to process out loud. "She did the thing again," I said. "The Brooke thing? The Brooke thing. The Rooks thing." He was quiet for a second. "You know you don't have to keep going." "I know. I mean it. You can just not go." "I know. Nora." "I know, Daniel. We have this conversation occasionally." He says it gently, and I say I know, and then I go the next year because my mom needs me to go, and because some part of me still believes that it'll be different. That I'll show up and my aunt will just be my aunt, without the running commentary on my life choices. That the comparison will stop now that I've caught up, or surpassed, or whatever the word is for when you finally have the things someone said you'd never have. But I wasn't ready to talk about the house yet, or the engagement. I needed it to be mine for a little longer. The conversation I'd been delaying finally happened in February. My mom wanted to do a late holiday dinner, the kind of thing our family sometimes does, when the actual holidays are too scattered and people miss each other. She reserved a private room at an Italian restaurant in Columbus. A nice place, the kind with cloth napkins and a bread basket that actually gets refilled. She said it would be low-key. My aunt, my uncle, Brooke and Pete, my mom and me, and Daniel, who was coming with me for the first time to a family gathering, which my mom had quietly told my aunt about ahead of time. I should say that my aunt had been perfectly warm to Daniel over text. She'd met him once before, briefly, at a cousin's graduation party. She'd told my mom he seemed lovely. I believed her. My aunt is not a cruel person. I need to keep saying that, because it would be easier if she were. We drove up together, Daniel and I. I had his ring on my finger, the simple gold band I picked out myself, and that fit exactly right. But I'd worn it on my right hand for the drive up because I wanted to control the timing. We got there first. My mom was already at the table with a glass of wine, and she looked up when we walked in and her face did the thing it does when she's trying very hard not to cry in public. My aunt and uncle arrived 7 minutes later. Brooke and Pete after that. We ordered appetizers. The bread came. My uncle told a long story about something that happened at his golf club, and everyone laughed. Then my aunt looked at me across the table and said, "So, you two have been together? How long now? 3 years?" "Almost 4, I said. "Almost 4, I said. She had the look of someone about to say something kind. "Well, there's no rush, of course. But I'm sure your mom would love—" "Actually," I said, "we do have some news." I switched the ring to my left hand under the table. Then I put my left hand on the table. It took her a moment to see it. "We got engaged," I said. "In June." The table went quiet in a different way than Thanksgiving, a fuller quiet. My mom made a sound that was not quite a word. My aunt looked at the ring, then at me, then at Daniel, then back at me, then at Daniel, then back at me. "June," she said. That's 8 months ago." "We wanted to take some time before telling everyone," I said. "We've been enjoying it privately." And she paused. Where are you living? Are you still in Portland?" "No," I said. "We bought a house in April, in Coos Bay. We've been there since May." There was a longer pause. "You bought a house," she said. "Mm-hmm." "And got engaged." "Yes." "And you didn't—" She stopped. She picked up her water glass. She set it down. "Well," she said, and her voice was entirely controlled. "Congratulations." That's wonderful." Brooke smiled at me from across the table. It was a real smile. Genuine. She reached over and squeezed my hand and said quietly, "I'm so happy for you." My uncle said something jovial, and the conversation moved on, and the bread basket was refilled, and somewhere in the middle of the main course, my aunt asked polite questions about the house, the town, what I thought of the winters on the coast. She was gracious. She is always gracious. I don't think she knew, in that moment, what to do with the fact that I had the things she'd been suggesting I didn't have, and that I'd had them for months without needing to tell her. What she'd said at Thanksgiving echoed a little in my head. At your age, Brooke already had a down payment saved. I hadn't corrected her then. I let it sit, not because I was ashamed, and not because I was ashamed, and not because I was planning something, but because it wasn't the moment, because I wasn't doing this for her. That's the thing I want you to hear. I didn't buy the house so I could announce it. I didn't get engaged so I could prove something. I built my life the way I built it because it was mine to build, and the timeline was mine to keep, and I didn't owe anyone a progress report. We got married in September. A small ceremony at a winery an hour from our house, 22 people, the kind of afternoon where the light comes in gold and low and everyone you love is in one room and it feels exactly the size it's supposed to be. My aunt and uncle were there. My mom was there. Brooke and Pete were there, and Brooke cried during the vows, which I did not expect, and which made me cry, and Daniel looked at me the whole time with this expression I am still not sure I have words for. After dinner, when the dancing had started, and most people had moved outside where there were string lights and someone's speaker playing the playlist Daniel and I had spent 2 weeks on, my aunt found me near the bar. She hugged me. Held on a second longer than usual. "You look beautiful," she said. "Thank you." She pulled back and looked at me, and there was something in her face that I hadn't seen before, or hadn't recognized before. Not guilt, exactly. More like recalibration. like she was adjusting something internally that she wasn't going to name out loud. "You've done well," she said, "with all of it. I hope you know that." I didn't make her say more. I didn't need the acknowledgement spelled out. I just said, "Thank you, Aunt Patricia. I'm really happy." And I was. I am. We have a garden now. Daniel built the raised beds in the spring, these solid cedar frames that are probably more structurally sound than they need to be, because that's how he is about things he builds. I grow tomatoes and zucchini and herbs I use, maybe half of, and give the rest to our neighbors. There's a porch swing. The dog, whose name is Fig, spends approximately 80% of his life asleep on it. Some mornings I sit out there with my coffee before Daniel wakes up, and I watch the light change over the water in the distance, and I think about the version of myself that used to drive 4 hours to sit at a table and quietly absorb the suggestion that she wasn't quite enough. I don't go to as many holiday gatherings now, not because I'm angry or estranged or holding anything against anyone, but because I finally understood that choosing where I spend my energy is not a hostile act. It's just a choice. And I'm allowed to make it. My mom visits us every few months. She sits on the porch swing and drinks tea and reads, and we talk the way we didn't always have space to talk when things were louder and more complicated. Last time she was here, she said, "I should have told you sooner that you were doing fine." I told her she was telling me now that it counted. There's a thing that happens when you stop waiting for the approval that's been withheld. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It doesn't feel like revenge. It feels, honestly, a little anticlimactic. You just wake up one day and realize you haven't been thinking about the comparison. You've been thinking about what you want to plant this spring and whether the porch swing needs a new cushion and what you're making for dinner. You weren't late. You weren't drifting. You were just building something that didn't need to be witnessed to be real. And if you're sitting somewhere right now, late at night or early in the morning or somewhere in between, and you have people in your life who keep the comparison running, who set down their forks and tell you where you should be by now, I just want to say, the thing you're building is still being built, whether they can see it or not. You don't need to announce it before it's ready. You don't need their framework to measure it. It's yours. I've thought a lot about why I didn't say anything at that Thanksgiving table. Why I just nodded and picked up my fork and let my aunt's words settle over me like they always had. Some people would call that weakness. I used to call it that too. But I don't anymore. What I understand now is that there's a difference between silence born from fear and silence born from knowing that the moment isn't yours yet. When my aunt set down her fork and told me that Brooke had her down payment saved by my age, I already owned my house. I already had Daniel's ring waiting for the right time. I didn't say anything, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had stopped needing her to know. And that's a different thing entirely. The cause and effect of my life, when I look back at it honestly, is pretty simple. Every time I let someone else's timeline become the measuring stick for mine, I got smaller. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a little quieter, a little more apologetic, a little more likely to second-guess a decision I'd already made carefully and well. The comparison wasn't harmless. It had a cost. It cost me years of enjoying things privately before I'd already braced for the critique, and then I stopped. Not in a dramatic moment, not in a speech. I just stopped letting the measuring stick in. I bought the house without asking anyone's opinion. I got engaged in the way that felt right for Daniel and me. I built something real and solid in mine, and I let it be mine for a while before it became anyone else's information. That's the intelligence part, I think, not cleverness, not strategy. Just the slow, hard-won understanding that you don't owe anyone a preview of your life. You don't have to show your work while you're still doing it. The people who are genuinely for you will celebrate the finished thing just as much as they would have celebrated the process. And the people who only wanted the update so they could compare it to someone else's update, they'll recalibrate, or they won't. And either way, you'll be fine. The resilience wasn't in confronting my aunt. It was in showing up, year after year, absorbing what was said, choosing not to let it rewrite my plans, and then going home to the life I was quietly and steadily building anyway. That's the harder thing. Staying in the room with someone who underestimates you and not letting their version of you become the one you believe. And the integrity, the part I'm most proud of, is that I never built any of it to prove a point. The house is real because I wanted a house. The marriage is real because Daniel is the person I want. The life is real because I chose it, not because I needed anyone at that table to finally see me clearly. My aunt said, "That's wonderful," when she found out. And she meant it, I think, as much as she was able to. I didn't need more than that. I had already stopped keeping score.